right, I want to start off with a question for everybody. How many of you in the past 3 months have written and sent a press release to anybody in the media? 2. How many of you in the last 6 months or the last 3 months have written a formal press release and sent it to anybody in the working media? Okay, so 4 or 5 of you. Great. So we have an opportunity here. So some of you do this regularly. In fact, one of the survey responses I saw from someone who did it regularly was when I asked if there's an issue or thing you want to talk about, they said, I want to know how to write better headlines. So that's something we all need to do. And in fact, one of the exercises we're going to do during this next segment is we're going to write a couple of headlines. And we're going to share them with one another. And we're going to talk about them a little bit. So that's very rudimentary, but it really is also very important because it's a discipline in focusing on what you want to say, how to say it, and doing so in a way that's engaging and compelling. Okay. But so this next session, we're going to do a little bit about learning about what the media wants, how to engage with the media in accomplishing your own goals. Okay. So here's some good news. The good news about if you've seen the decline of you, how many of you subscribe to a newspaper? Not many.
Online?
In any online, offline? Okay.
Get your phone. Read it every day.
All right. So you probably have seen, particularly those of you online, you were probably had to be an offline subscriber at one point. It's gotten smaller. Maybe physically, it's gotten thinner. It doesn't have as many ads, and so you've heard about this kind of death of the newspaper. But in a way, this kind of explosion of social media has said, look, when we look at traditional newspapers, which is a way a lot of us have tried to communicate our news in the past, they have fewer staff, which is not a good thing because it's hard to get somebody there to pay attention to something that you want, and it's hard to get your news being paid attention to. But here's the good thing. There's fewer staff, but there's actually more content that's out there than there was before. More stuff about things going on. So that, in fact, creates more opportunities because press and newspapers in particular are more reliant on you than ever before to tell them what's going on and providing free places for you to actually give it to them, where other people can find it online. I'm doing a series of community events now on an education issue, and the largest way we have of getting our community notices out are in the community notices sections of online editions of newspapers, community papers, large daily papers, etc., where they often take our information and post it and also let us put a logo with it and not charge us for it. So we'll talk about that, but there are those things that are available to you that don't even require picking up the phone and calling a reporter and saying, look, and this is what's going on, to begin to share your news. That idea of free space is something that we'll come back to. And at the heart of it, we talked a little bit about stories and the importance of stories. And these are just a couple of the pictures that I found in trolling some of the pages online from the work of perhaps some people in the room and others around programs and projects funded by the Episcopal Charities here. So there's a story here with each of these programs or efforts. Every spring, and in South Florida this could be year-round because I know there are more than one growing season, but this is evergreen. This happens all the time. There are community garden stories and feeding stories like this that show up in the community press. The whole notion of even something as simple as a new van, I think this is from Star of the Sea down in Key West. Wow, that's a pretty cool thing. And I see a photo and I see people and I see stories there, as well as what's happening here, whether it's around a holiday or a shelter or something. So all of those things become these engaging ways we can begin to tell these stories. So St. Paul's is represented, Paul's Place. Did you see the photograph here? And we talked about Star of the Sea, St. Columba and Marathon. We have an image here. What else do we have? St. John's Support Jubilee Center in Hollywood is also represented here. So lots of great stories here. And the question that we often ask is then, what's news and who gets to decide what goes in the paper and doesn't go in the paper, what gets paid attention to and doesn't get paid attention to. So this is the challenge, and to be able to communicate it is important. So I put together a set of tips from news reporters and editors that I've talked to about what and how we can begin to get attention from them. And it's about a couple of things, just like life. One is the stories we can tell and the ways we can engage someone. The second is about the relationships and understanding and mutual affection, if you will, that we can begin to develop also. And we'll talk about both of those things because they're both important. And the last thing we'll talk about is persistence, and I'll have a little story to share there too. So here are a couple of ideas to make notes with, because they really begin to help frame a way you can begin to tell your story that breaks through. And the first, I think, is so great because aren't we all about stories of success or adversity overcome? We deal with that every day, and you see those moments within the programs and the growth. What has been achieved that is new or different? Have you started a new type of program? Is it in a new place? Have you involved a new group of people? So that idea of what's different about what we're doing now is a cue. Is there something that you're creating that's open to the public, that's free? Is it an event? Is it a fundraiser? Is it a car wash? It is again, there's a calendar or communications idea or opportunity. Or is there a program that you're doing? I just brought this because I pulled this out and I said, gosh, this is so relevant. It's still from about 10 months ago, but this is my little hometown paper, and I'll just pass it around. The headline here is Ministry Asks Community to Donate Food for a Bit. And it's such a great example. I'll pass this story around. It's just such a great example of a program that's been developed and shared that I think you would find interesting. And the one thing that they have also said here, and this becomes important, you're all experts at something, right? You're an expert at serving the homeless. You're an expert at understanding kind of youth programs or behaviors. You're an expert at your area of focus. You have an opportunity then, if questions come up because of things happening in your community, to say, I'm available here. If you want to talk about these topics, let me know. Here's how I can help you. And then finally, as many reporters will tell you, if so-and-so down the street just did this story, that's fine. Give me something different. So you can't take the same thing and just walk it around town and give it to the same people. Now, if it's if it's a fundraiser or if it's an event, give it to everybody at the same time. But I think that's very important. If it's been reported already and somebody's done a story on it, don't turn around and expect the next person to write that same story. Okay. And this is, I just Googled or did a quick search in the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel around homelessness. And this is one of the first stories that came up.
I just wanted to share with you, we had a feeding program over the Christmas holiday, and it was a partnership that was formed with a local legislator.
Great.
And our church. They needed a place, so we became a partner. And sometimes that's a way to get some media exposure as well, because they took care of the media. They brought the media. But
You had a television station come.
and
right?
we got
Yep.
10-minute coverage on the evening news. So
So the idea there was, is there a partner or someone, it could be a legislator or someone else who can bring some of those resources to you. That was a great example there. So being part of that community, and this idea is actually very similar to the one in the article that I've just passed around here in terms of how you might share that. And I think that also the idea too is that you can look around you and see, is there something happening in the news today? Is there something that's happening in our community today? So, for example, if you see or hear a report that said the nation's homelessness is on the rise, the number of those who are homeless are growing, you can say, gosh, I have a good feeling for this here and seeing what's happening in my community. You can take that bigger story and say, what does it mean to us here? And that becomes a basis for you to be able to send a note to an editor or reporter and say, gosh, this would be an interesting topic for us, and guess what? Come out to St. Paul's and see what we're doing here to help us right here in the community. And reporters are waiting for you. Remember, there are fewer reporters and they have more things to do. They need your help more than ever. They like that kind of thinking. You've done a lot of the work for them already. You've given them an idea. You've given them some facts and statistics. You've connected it to the community, which is what they're reporting on, and now you've put a face on it. That face is you and the people you serve. And who's going to be seeing it and reading it? I would guess some of the people that are on that list where you've written the audience we're trying to reach and what we want to tell them. And all of a sudden you can see that part of your plan is starting to perhaps come to life through that kind of technique. Does that example make sense? I mean, there was a good case again from the holiday standpoint too. It filled a lot of needs. So you see that happening every day. This was a case where, and this is something that Neva Ray worked on, a year after the Haiti earthquake, there was a lot of interest, and you see this around anniversaries. Another example is that a year ago did something happen where people were very interested in what's going on in Haiti now that shows recovery may be underway. And what we knew, other than the fact that we serve as a church, obviously have a huge presence there, one of the symbols of the recovery for the country continues to be the cathedral. And the cathedral and the murals at the cathedral were something that continue to be looked at and discussed because they are so symbolic. And for us, the importance there is that this is a way of continuing to put a face on this story that is not only connected to the church, but connected to the symbols of moving forward toward recovery and the people that are involved in it. So the anniversary is a way, and coming up next January will be the 5th anniversary. So, you know, we're already working on those kinds of things. So as you begin to look at, we'll talk about building your plan, this notion of a calendar and looking for those moments allows you to start building that basic plan. We're not talking about creating an MBA kind of document here. We're talking about something that's very simple that you can begin to follow along with. So this is the relationship part. And the relationship part is there is a little bit of groundwork here to do. And getting to know your local press can pay dividends. One of the things that I did when Neva Ray was unable to join us this week was I talked to Bonnie and Donna a bit and said, gosh, could we reach out and maybe invite a member of the local press from the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel to join us and have her rather than me sit here and give you some examples of those connections. And the first person I started with was the features editor there, and I sent her a very short email with hopefully a pithy subject line, although I didn't put it up here, and invited her to come join us today. And she responded within 30 minutes, which is unusual for most editors, but I think usual for this particular editor. And she said, unfortunately, I can't, but perhaps you should contact our community features editor, our community editor, Ruben, and he might join you. So I said, Ruben, your features editor suggested that you might want to join us. And Ruben that afternoon, 2 hours later, said, I can't, but our religion editor may love to join you. And so guess what? That afternoon, I got a call from the religion editor.
Can't make it.
So she can't make it, but she said, I want to know more. I want to know more. Let's talk. So if you don't like getting said no to, and I know some of you are involved in fundraising, if you don't like that, you're in the wrong job. But the reality is it does take some persistence to and find that fine line between being a nuisance and being persistent. And we'll talk about the difference here just a little bit. But that third call opened the door to more of a conversation about what we're doing and opportunities. So that's a handoff I'll be making. But I think that the important, her name is Lois Solomon, by the way, the religion editor, but the important thing there is that there's some homework that needs to be done and some effort applied to help make this successful. So basically I did the first step, which is introduce myself and offer to kind of get together and to share in a non-threatening way. I tried to find out why it was important for her, because there was an opportunity for her to meet up to 35 people who had stories to tell about things happening in the community that she might be interested in. And in one 30-minute period, she could have 30 potential contacts to start filling her editorial basket for the year. So I'm trying to think about it again. What's in it for her? I know what's in it for me. It gave me a break and had somebody with more credibility than me telling you what she cared about in terms of getting stories. But what was in it for her? And I went in and looked at the kinds of things that she had been writing about. So the beauty of being online now is that you can do a quick search and see what's the last 10 things that they've written about on this topic, or haven't they written about it at all? And so when you do send a short note, you have that context right away. So you're connected and you're relevant and you can see what's important. When you do have an opportunity to get together, the very important thing too is to understand what their needs are and what their deadlines are. And usually if you just go to a website and you go to the bottom and it said, contact us, most community papers have that. It'll give you a list of who the key reporters or editors are, what their email addresses are, and it will sometimes also give you their preferences in terms of how they like to be contacted. So again, why is a lot of this information available today and it wasn't before is because they have more space to fill, they have fewer bodies in the newsroom, and they're looking for people who can become go-to sources of information for them. So we have opportunities here to do this. And as we talked about before, this idea when you do connect is you have an opportunity to be an expert. I heard a lot of expertise happen and be mentioned around the room here. So tips, know your press, introduce yourself, understand what their needs are, and then become important. So when you do get in touch with them, here's often how they ask to do that these days. And everybody has exceptions. But generally we found through a lot of the pitching that we have these days, it's true. editors, I don't care if it's TV, radio, online, whatever, they're living more and more at their desks and less in the communities because they have fewer time to be away. And they say, send us a short email first, because they're either not picking up their phones, or if they pick up their phones and it's you, their first thing is like, I don't have time, what do you want? We'll come back to that, okay? So email first, phone, and right there in that subject line, what's the idea? You know, a very short, and we'll come to this when we talk about email later, like 70 characters or less, 6 or 7 words, what it is you're communicating with them about. And it's not, hi, do you want to get together for coffee? Sure, they probably like coffee, but, and then, and we're talking these emails are probably only 2 or 3 paragraphs long, because longer than that are not going to get read. What's the main idea? We'll come into writing a press release and we'll get back to that. Are there 1 or 2 people that you'd like to connect them with? And if so, when are they available? And then finally, is there a visual? Is there an event? Is there a song? Is there a meal function? Is there a service? Is there something that's visual that they can imagine that can provide an image online, on their website, in their paper, whatever it might be? So this approach, and then often if you send an email, haven't heard anything for a bit, a day, 2 days, then you might make a short phone call. I have found more often than not that oftentimes I will get, if someone does pick up, they'll say, but I have my pitch. I said, I'm calling you about X. Here's when it's happening. Here's why I thought you'd be interested. Did you see my note? If they didn't, more often than not, they'll say, please send it again. And it goes to the top of their inbox, and I have more of a connection. Okay, so fairly simple process, but it's that homework in front that makes sense. And, you know, sometimes you're going to get rejected, but this process begins those conversations. And again, I shared my experience with the Sun Sentinel only because it's not atypical. But that third contact said, let's talk. Okay? So it's a start. So a couple of other little things for you here. So you've made it, trying to make it easy for them to get the story and easy for them to find you. How many of you do not have cell phones? Do not have cell phones. So you all have cell phones. Congratulations. It'll be easy for them to find you should they need to reach you. So that's the number you should give them, not a home number you rarely check. I have a landline at home. I never answer it because the only people that call me on it are telemarketers or people looking for money. Or
faxes.
beginning next year again,
Politicians.
pollsters.
I
And
use it as a fax line.
yeah, fax line. I have my internet connected to it. So that kind of thing. You know, and then also I invite you, I talked about the local newspaper, but other outlets. Are we, you know, do we have individuals in our media in, God forbid, languages other than Spanish or English that are important to us here, online or off? Creole.
Huge down here.
Increasingly Portuguese.
You know, I mentioned Lois Solomon and the religion editor. The fact of the matter is most of these stories that we're talking about aren't going to be reported on today's religion pages, if they even exist anymore, because most papers, the first jobs cut were religion editor jobs. But we're talking feature stories and community stories and maybe even a business story here. So there are a lot of different places and angles to look at there, and also these idea of non-religious, quote, topics. A lot of the topics we're talking about here are where faith and culture and politics and life intersect.